Thank you, Ellen, for the introduction. I'm Mary. I'm part of the Stop Burning Trees Coalition. I'll just explain briefly who we are. It's a coalition that started a couple of years ago, made up of grassroots groups around the north primarily, and now sort of spread a bit more across the UK, from trade unionists to health campaigners to very classic environmental campaigners, groups like XR, that sort of thing, all coming together to look at Drax because it's right where we live in Yorkshire, and have a look and see what we can do about that, because for various reasons a lot of people have a lot of issues with Drax, and that sort of led to this whole campaign starting. So to start with, have people heard of Drax? Are you aware of Drax? Oh, great, something's working. Cool, it's often not the case. So Drax is the biggest power station in the UK. It's in Yorkshire, about 20 miles away from York, where I live, and it is a wood biomass power station. It used to burn coal. There was a very long and successful campaign against Drax burning coal. They've now moved to burning wood biomass or trees for energy, and last year they completely stopped burning coal. And at the time it was seen as a green transition, and governments and international climate policy really encouraged this transition from burning coal to burning trees as a green solution. Unfortunately, the entire thing was completely swamped in greenwash. Drax in reality is actually the UK's single biggest carbon emitter. Burning trees emits just as much, if not more, carbon than coal over a 44 to 104 year period. But because of the fact that you can regrow trees, wood biomass is counted as carbon neutral, based on the idea that eventually the trees that are cut down and burned and shipped over here can be regrown, they'll reabsorb the carbon, and therefore it's carbon neutral and it's contributing to the UK's green energy mix. And it's also worth saying Drax is the biggest tree burning power station in the whole world. And because of this idea that it's carbon neutral, governments gave huge amounts of subsidies. Last year Drax received 850 million in public subsidies to burn trees. They also made 1.2 trillion in profits, and that was the second year of record profits, so profiting off subsidies from our energy bills and also profiting off sky-high energy bills as well. And these are green subsidies that also go to wind and solar and all those sorts of things. It worked out to about £2.5 million a day, just to put it in a little bit more context, last year. And Drax sources not from the UK. We don't have enough trees in the UK to actually feed Drax. I think last time someone worked it out, all of our forestry industry would get burnt in about 12 days if we were giving it to Drax. So we've got to go elsewhere, to places where they haven't yet lost all of their forests. So primarily North America, in particular British Columbia, in Canada, the southeastern US, and then some of the European countries like Estonia, Portugal, Latvia, and also in Brazil a bit as well. And in Canada, there's been a few different investigations you might have seen about Drax's sourcing, from them sourcing from primary old growth forests, rare forests that have existed for hundreds of years, previously untouched and supposedly protected because their vital carbon sinks. But unfortunately, the reality is Drax is sourcing from those forests, shipping them over here, taking them via train from ports to Drax in Yorkshire, and burning them, all in the name of green energy. But it's not just the impact on forests and the huge amounts of carbon emissions that are coming from Drax, even if we are just ignoring the carbon emissions in this country. There is huge amounts of environmental injustice that come alongside the wood biomass industry, and particularly Drax's behaviour. So this is a picture of a wood pellet plant. It's horrible quality, so I apologise. But if you can see that, that's the wood pellet plant site where they're turning these trees into little pellets to be shipped over here. And then this is a community living just across the river. And the wood pellet production process emits really dangerous pollutants that cause people living there really serious health issues, from cancer to asthma to pulmonary issues. There are whole communities which are environmental justice communities primarily, meaning there's 25% or more people of colour living there, and a higher than state average level of poverty. So these are historically marginalised, politically low power communities who are having these pellet production sites plopped in their communities, emitting this really dangerous pollutants, so to the point where people can't cook outside anymore, they can't hang their laundry out because of all the wood dust, and they can't breathe either. And they're also losing all of their forests as well in the name of what Drax is doing. And it's not just obviously communities abroad that are exposed to this wood dust. workers over here in the UK are also exposed to the same wood dust, causing health issues and leading to all sorts of respiratory problems. But nonetheless, this is what is being pushed for by the government in the name of green energy for the UK. So I'm just going to show you a couple of maps here. On the right-hand side, you've got a map of wood pellet production sites in the southeast US, and then on the left-hand side, you've got a map of southern cotton production in 1860. And it was a campaigner, Catherine Egland, who showed these maps to me, and there's a pretty stark contrast between where these wood pellet production sites are and where cotton picking was happening in the 1800s. And again, that is still being exported over to the UK for us to benefit from it. And these same communities that have been historically dispossessed, exploited, marginalised and harmed are now being harmed in the name of the UK's green energy. We're seeing a form of green colonialism. And we're all paying for it through these subsidies on our energy bills. So, I am whizzing through this. I could rant about Drax for years. But it's worth now looking at where Drax is going next. So, as I said, Drax is currently getting huge amounts of subsidies, 2 different types. Those subsidies are due to run out in 2027. And we've talked a lot about carbon capture and storage. I'm going to specifically talk about bioenergy with carbon capture and storage with the help of this lovely little graphic that Drax has made, which is very accurate and true, and believe everything it says. But the idea that's being pushed by the wood biomass industry and also by governments and international climate agreements is the idea of using carbon capture technology to create what they're calling negative emissions. Because wood biomass is already counted as carbon neutral, if you then capture the non-existent carbon from burning these trees, you can then generate negative emissions. And with these negative emissions, you can offset harder to decarbonise industries, you can offset fossil fuels, you can offset steel production. And everything on paper adds up, and that's what really counts when it comes to the planet. Creative carbon accounting, in their view, will fix all of the problems. And so Drax has been lobbying very hard for these to get new subsidies to build bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. In January this year, their planning permission was approved to build BECCS on 2 of their units. And like all carbon capture and storage, but even more so when it comes to bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, it doesn't exist at scale anywhere in the world. Drax is, in their words, pioneering, in our words, making it up, that they are going to lead the world with building this BECCS and create negative emissions. So they're asking the government for huge amounts of subsidies. It is estimated it will cost the British public about £40 billion for them to build BECCS. They've already, which is a huge, huge amount of money, like imagine what we could be doing with that money in our communities. And even before they get to building BECCS, because they've already asked for 7 years to delay their actual building of BECCS, they are asking for interim subsidies to help tide them over to the place where they actually can eventually build BECCS when it has been made feasible, technologically speaking. And it comes with all the same things of the energy penalty of needing fossil fuels to power it, and so on and so forth. And it also ignores the one very key thing that a lot of people might say is common sense, is we do actually have things that already absorb carbon, trees, forests, soil, and Drax is destroying them in the name of this green energy so that they can then build this technological fix and continue making money, continue receiving these subsidies. So, and it's not just the climate side of what they're doing with BECCS in Yorkshire as well. They're also, and to politicians, they're pushing the job side of BECCS as well. They're saying, with building BECCS at Drax, we'll bring 10,000 green jobs to the north. And you see this, as you see with the fossil fuel industry, where they vastly inflate their jobs claims. They say we're bringing a huge amount. You look into the figures. For Drax, it's 375 long-term jobs after peak construction, and they're counting all the induced jobs and so on and so forth. But what you have is this really horrifying twist of greenwashing and jobswashing, where they're not just putting climate action at odds with jobs, but they're actually saying they're using their greenwash to say we're bringing these green jobs, and they're co-opting that narrative of the green jobs that we actually need to address the climate crisis and for a just transition for workers. And through these promises of negative emissions, through these promises of jobs and everything, we are seeing the continuation of the current structures of exploitation and extraction from other countries for the UK's energy needs. We're seeing a market solution to a crisis that has been caused by capitalism and colonialism. The subsidies they're offering for BECCS include one for actually generating energy and one for capturing carbon, and that carbon can then be traded on carbon markets and so on. But they're using this just to continue the same systems and promise future negative emissions, so that they never actually have to do any real climate action to address the climate crisis. And so it's coming from DRACs, both through lobbying, but it's also coming from the government, who need this to meet their climate targets. They need DRACs to say, look how much renewable energy we're generating. And so you have this sort of mutual interest that's serving to prevent any real climate action from happening, and also preventing investment in genuine green jobs in the north, in Yorkshire, of which there are many, many opportunities to do that. So I'm going to wrap up because I think I've talked for too long. But just finally, what we have with DRACs and the wood biomass industry is we have harms happening in the UK to the workers exposed to this toxic wood dust, and also the differences between how DRACs treats their direct employees and their contracted employees, and things like their catering staff, who are paid far, far less and treated far worse. There's a picture of them striking. They've been on strike recently for a pay rise that would cost DRACs in total about £33,000, which, given they get £2.5 million of our money every single day, you'd think they could give their catering workers a pay rise. And then you have the harm that's being caused to the communities abroad, to the forests abroad, and also the workers who are in the wood pellet production sites abroad as well, who are exposed to this same wood dust. And then, of course, you have the climate impacts. You have the fact that DRACs is the UK's single largest carbon emitter. And so what we need, and what the view of Stop Burning Trees Coalition, and hopefully lots of people, is that we need a solution to this. We need a way to move past these capitalist colonial solutions to the climate crisis in a way that doesn't allow corporations to determine the narrative of what a just transition looks like. We need workers involved, we need climate activists involved, and we also need the communities who are being poisoned in the name of Britain's green energy abroad involved in this, to see how we can move forward, how we can have genuine green jobs in the north, how the harm that has been done to those communities can be addressed, how those communities can be supported, and how we can stop cutting down our forests in the name of green energy. So we need these alternative realities that go beyond green growth, which DRACs and BECCS fundamentally serve to protect. We need all of us from every sector and across the world to address this, and hopefully we can have some good discussion about that. Thank you.